March 6, 1944. For the first time in the war, American bombers were ordered to strike Berlin in broad daylight. 700 B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators thundered east across the North Sea, escorted by a new and untested guardian, the P-51 Mustang. To the men on the ground, it began as a distant hum on the horizon. To those in the air, it was the sound of defiance. At 25,000 feet, the contrails of two great air forces began to cross, one fighting to reach the heart of the Reich, the other to protect it. By noon, more than 400 German fighters had risen to meet them. The sky over Magdeburg and Berlin turned white with smoke and fire. Fortress after fortress went down in flames, yet the Mustangs stayed, cutting through the Luftwaffe formations with a speed and precision that stunned veteran pilots. When the battle ended, 69 bombers and 11 Mustangs were lost, but the Luftwaffe left more than 140 of its best aircraft scattered across the snow. That day, Berlin burned not just from bombs, but from a truth that could no longer be denied. The myth of air superiority was over. The hunters had become the hunted. And this is the story of how the Mustang broke the Luftwaffe and changed the war in the air forever. Before the Mustang arrived, the daylight bombing campaign was on the edge of collapse. In 1943, American commanders believed that tight bomber formations and defensive machine guns could protect their crews all the way to their targets. They called it the self-defending fortress theory. It looked convincing on paper until it met the reality of the German sky. The Luftwaffe's Bf-109s and Fw-190s tore through those formations with ruthless precision. Bombers burned in mid-air, spinning down like fiery wheels. Crews parachuted into the freezing void or vanished completely, never seen again. The missions over Schweinfurt and Regensburg became disasters etched into memory. 60 bombers lost in one day, hundreds of airmen missing. It was called Black Week, a series of operations so costly that even the most loyal pilots began to question the strategy. For every 100 men who climbed aboard a flying fortress, only about 20 would complete their required tours. The rest were dead, wounded, or prisoners. Factories in Germany were still running. The enemy was stronger than ever, and the one thing the Americans needed most, long-range fighter protection, didn't exist. The P-47 Thunderbolt and P-38 Lightning could only escort them halfway. Beyond that line, the bombers were alone. That was the breaking point. The air war could not continue this way. Something had to change, and soon. The answer to America's greatest air war problem didn't come from a general's desk. It came from a desperate collaboration between two nations. In 1940, the British had approached North American aviation to design a new fighter, one that could outfly the German Messerschmitt. The company promised to deliver it in just 120 days. The result was the P-51 Mustang, sleek, fast, but flawed. Its first versions, powered by the Allison engine, performed well at low altitude, but struggled to breathe above 15,000 feet. Over the European front, where battles raged in the thin, frozen air at 25,000 feet, that flaw was fatal. The aircraft was dismissed as another failed experiment, but war rewards those who refuse to give up. A British engineer suggested an idea that changed history. Replace the Allison with the Rolls-Royce Merlin, the same engine that powered the Spitfire. The transformation was instant. The Mustang became something entirely new, a fighter that could climb faster, dive harder, and still fly deep into Germany and back. With its laminar flow wings reducing drag and its drop tanks extending range beyond anything before it, the P-51 was no longer just a fighter, it was endurance shaped into steel. When the first Merlin-powered Mustangs took flight, test pilots knew the balance of the air war had shifted. The machine that began as an unwanted British request had become the key to survival for every American bomber crew. The Mustang wasn't born from victory, it was born from failure, and from the will to turn that failure into a weapon. To the men who flew it, the P-51 Mustang was more than a machine. It felt alive. Its long, elegant wings cut cleanly through the air. Its fuselage balanced perfectly between speed and stability. For the first time, American pilots had an aircraft that could meet the Luftwaffe on equal terms and even surpass it. The Mustang didn't just fly, it listened. It responded instantly, smoothly, almost as if it understood the man in the cockpit. Pilots would later say that when they strapped into a Mustang, they didn't feel like they were climbing into a fighter. They felt like they were joining with it. The heart of that bond was the Packard-built Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. It didn't just run, it sang a deep, confident roar that became the anthem of Allied air power. With 6 .50 caliber Browning machine guns, the Mustang could tear through enemy formations with deadly precision. Yet its true weapon wasn't just firepower, it was a range. Equipped with external fuel tanks, the Mustang could escort bombers all the way from England to Berlin, then back again, a mission no Allied fighter had ever managed before. This was the moment the balance shifted. The Luftwaffe no longer faced tired thunderbolts turning back halfway across the Rhine. Now, the bombers had guardians that never left their side. And in the frozen air above Europe, German pilots began to hear a new sound in their headphones, the warning that meant death was near. Achtung Mustangs, March 6, 1944. Before dawn, the airfields of England were alive with movement. Ground crews shouted over roaring engines, breath turning to mist in the freezing air. Pilots climbed into their cockpits, knowing this mission was unlike any before it. Their target, Berlin, the center of Hitler's empire. Until now, even the boldest Allied commanders had avoided it in daylight. But today, that line would be crossed. By sunrise, more than 730 bombers of the 8th Air Force began to lift off one by one, their silver wings glinting in the pale light. B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators stretched across the sky in mile-long formations, their bomb loads destined for aircraft plants, railway yards, and fuel depots inside the Reich. Surrounding them, climbing steadily higher, came their new guardians 262 P-51 Mustangs, joined by thunderbolts and lightnings at lower altitudes. For the first time, the bombers would not be alone. As the Armada crossed the North Sea, German radar operators sounded the alarm. The command, Abfangen Intercept, echoed across Luftwaffe radio networks. From airfields near Hanover, Brunswick, and Magdeburg, more than 400, Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s scrambled into the cold blue sky. The defenders were veterans. Many had flown since the Battle of Britain, but few had ever faced enemy fighters at this altitude, this deep inside their homeland. The first contact came near Magdeburg. A wave of German fighters dived head-on into the bomber stream, cannons blazing, trying to break the formation. The sky erupted in chaos. Tracers streaked across the clouds, flak burst like black flowers, and bombers fell burning toward the snow-covered fields below. But then the Mustangs struck. They came screaming down from altitude in tight pairs, engines howling, guns flashing. Their 6 Browning, 50 caliber machine guns shredded enemy aircraft before the Germans even realized they were being attacked. Radio calls filled the air. Bandits 12 o'clock high. I've got one on fire. Stay with the forts. The Mustangs didn't just defend, they dominated. Wherever German formations tried to regroup, another flight of P-51s cut through them like blades of silver light. By midday, the leading bomber groups had reached Berlin. From 25,000 feet, the crews watched the city that once boasted it would never fall to daylight bombs. Explosions rippled through factory districts, railway lines, and fuel plants. Black smoke rose over the capital of the Reich as the first wave turned for home, and the second pressed on. Berlin's anti-aircraft batteries filled the sky, but it didn't matter, the impossible had happened. The enemy's heart was burning in daylight. When the formations finally returned to England, 69 bombers and 11 Mustangs had been lost. But the Luftwaffe had suffered something far greater. More than 140 fighters destroyed and dozens more damaged beyond repair. Many of their best pilots never returned. That day didn't just prove a new aircraft, it proved a new reality. The Luftwaffe was no longer defending the skies. It was fighting for survival. And above the clouds, where pride once reigned, a new sound ruled the air, the steady heartbeat of the Merlin engine, carrying the war straight into the heart of the Reich. Before the spring of 1944, the German Luftwaffe still believed it ruled the sky. Its aces were legends, men who had survived since the early victories over Poland, France, and Britain. They fought with precision, patience, and pride, ambushing American bombers after their escorts turned back. They were hunters, trained to strike fast and vanish into the clouds. But after March 6, 1944, that confidence began to fracture. The Mustang had changed everything. Its range was endless, its climb unmatched, and its pilots had been given new orders. Don't just protect the bombers, destroy the Luftwaffe. For the first time, the Americans took the fight deep into Germany. Mustang squadrons roamed freely, seeking out enemy formations before they could reach the bombers. What had once been a defensive escort mission turned into a relentless offensive. German radar screens lit up daily with warnings. Airfields that had once been safe now trembled under low-flying Mustangs, strafing hangars, fuel dumps, and aircraft lined up for takeoff. Entire Luftwaffe units were forced to scatter, their bases constantly under attack. Pilots who had once been predators now scrambled for cover as machine gun rounds tore through their runways. Even the most skilled German aces began to feel the shift. Günter Rahl, one of Germany's top scorers, later admitted, "When I heard the Mustang, I didn't feel anger, I felt small." The fear wasn't just of defeat, but of inevitability. The Mustang could appear anywhere, anytime, at any altitude. The sound of its Merlin engine became a warning bell, the echo of a war Germany could no longer win. By summer, the Luftwaffe's strength was bleeding away faster than it could be replaced. Pilots were running out of fuel, experience, and hope. For the first time since the war began, the hunters looked up and realized the sky no longer belonged to them. By the end of 1944, the roar of the Mustang's Merlin engine had become the soundtrack of Allied victory in the air. Every mission it flew pushed the front line of the war deeper into German territory. The Luftwaffe that once dominated the sky was now only a shadow of what it had been, starved of fuel, short of pilots, and stripped of the confidence that had once made it unstoppable. But the story of the Mustang was never just about technology. It was about endurance, the kind that keeps fighting long after hope begins to fade. The P-51's design was a masterpiece of purpose. Its laminar flow wings gave it speed and efficiency, its drop tanks gave it reach, and its Merlin engine gave it life at altitudes where most aircraft gasped for air. But its true legacy lived in the men who flew it. Many were barely out of their 20s, yet they carried the fate of thousands of bomber crews behind them. They learned that victory in the air wasn't about glory or kill counts, it was about bringing men home. Every flight over Germany was a gamble. A single burst of flak, a frozen control line, or a hit to a fuel tank could end everything in seconds. Yet they kept flying. And as each Mustang returned to its base with bullet holes across its wings and smoke trailing from its engine, it carried proof that courage and innovation could rewrite the laws of war. The Merlin's voice became more than the sound of an engine. It was the sound of persistence. It reminded the world that strength isn't measured only by firepower, but by the will to keep going when everything says stop. When the sun set on March 6, 1944, the sky over Germany was quiet again. The smoke that had drifted across Berlin began to fade, and the last contrails disappeared into the evening light. On the ground, mechanics counted the returning aircraft in silence, one, then another, and another. Many came back scarred and smoking, their fuselages torn by flak, their wings peppered with bullet holes. But they came back. For hundreds of airmen who had once faced death alone, that day proved a new truth. The bombers no longer flew into hell by themselves. The Luftwaffe, once feared across Europe, would never recover from that loss. Its veteran pilots were gone, its fuel reserves dwindling, its faith broken. The hunters had become ghosts in their own skies, and from that moment on, the Allies owned the air, paving the way for D-Day, for victory, and for the end of a war that had consumed the world. In the years that followed, the P-51 Mustang continued to fly over Korea, in air shows, and in museums where its silver skin still glints beneath hangar lights. But to those who remember, the sound of its Merlin engine will always mean more than power. It means perseverance, it means protection. It means freedom earned the hard way. The Mustang didn't just change the war, it changed the sky itself. And every time its echo rises again, somewhere above a field or runway, it carries the same message that it carried over Berlin on that cold March morning. That courage, innovation, and endurance can turn even the darkest battle into victory.